146,000, Your Worship, is our number.
What's the number?
146,000, if that's the average for 365 days.
Yeah, that can't be right. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. We could please stand for a moment of silent reflection and maybe think of the victims of Nova Scotia and remain standing for O Canada. Thank you. Members of council, you've had a chance to look at items on the agenda. Is there any disclosures of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Adoption of the minutes held April 14th, 2020. Moved by Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Reno. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Any additions, corrections? Okay. Mayor's comments. I just have a couple. In the past week, our thoughts have been with Nova Scotia in their time of loss with this tragic death of 22 Canadians. Words cannot express our sorrow for the victims and their families. We continue to say a sincere thank you to our first responders, nurses, doctors, EMS, restaurants, grocery store employees, and all who are working hard to care for and support our community. Likewise, we want to thank the members of LaSalle Police Service for protecting and keeping our community safe. As a reminder, the boat ramp remains closed and fishing is prohibited on public property, as our parks are closed except for walk-through access. This is part of the town's emergency declaration to support the province and health units' directives to stay home. We will continue to follow the directives of the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit for the safety of our residents. We have no presentations, delegations. We'll go to our first report. E1, the acquisition of waterfront property, and Mr. Dedal.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi, and good evening, members of council. So tonight's report before you is basically for you to approve 3 items. Number 1, that you agree that the taking of the lands that are described in the report is fair, sound, and reasonably necessary for the town to achieve its objectives. Number 2, to approve the bylaw. Number 8426, that's also part of this agenda tonight. And that you're authorizing me to go forward to prepare the necessary notices and reasons and whatnot documents to finalize the said expropriation. So as a high level review, in terms of just, I guess, the history of the waterfront, we've been acquiring land going back, the first parcel, I believe, goes back to the 1930s, but over time, specifically the last 20, 30 years, we've begun to acquire different properties down at the waterfront. The development of the waterfront and control, I guess, is the main issue here in the town's hands, is what the objective is here for us to be able to install the vision that that you as council have to develop that waterfront area. In terms of that opinion, this notion was backed by the inquiry officer who heard the hearing of necessity that we had back in December. In terms of the location of the lands, it's a logical one, given that the lands that these two properties that are left, the land surrounding it is either owned by the town already or we're in the process of acquiring it. And in terms of making it a destination area, once again, that there's plenty of investments that we've made already, both in terms of most recently the marina that was purchased in 2018. And then there's been a few properties that we've actually acquired this year as this process has gone on that are outside of the initial expropriation that we brought forth back in last year. On that note, we began with 4 properties as part of the expropriation proceedings. We have closed on the acquisition of 1. That's the one at the rear of the vacant land that we referred to in tonight's meeting. And the other one is the what we know as the Siri property across the street from Bouffard that goes all the way to the waterfront. That one is set to close at the end of May currently. But we do have agreements in place on both of those. In terms of the other 2 that are left, we've had full appraisals done, and those were sent out to the individual landowners as well as their legal counsel for their review. And we've sent an offer accompanying those appraisals. We haven't finalized anything yet there. They're having their appraisers obviously look at the report and come back to us with whatever comments they have. So we're still awaiting that. But even if we say, yes, we are going to go forward with the expropriation tonight, the concept is that we will still be in a position to discuss with their legal counsel and try to hopefully come to an arrangement without going all the way to the final step. But this at least gives us that last tool in the toolkit, so to speak. As of today, there was, I believe, 1 objection came in from one of the residents about the expropriation proceedings. In terms of the town's perspective, there's really, with the vacant land, there's only the issue of valuation at this point. In terms of the other property, there's the valuation, number 1, and number 2 will be the timing of when we take possession. Obviously, with individuals living there, we're going to be a little more, I would think, cognizant of that going forward. And we've had some good dialogue already with the lawyers there. So it's been positive so far. So we're looking forward to working with them going forward. So at the end of the day, I guess the point that I'm making is that the expropriation for these properties is fair, sound, and reasonably necessary for us to further develop the waterfront and parkland in that area, and that this is needed to achieve the town's objectives, and that I ask you to approve both the report and the bylaw later on this evening. And I'm open to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Dominic. Council questions. Councillor Akpata.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Dominic. Dominic, I just have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. You spoke about a hearing of necessity, and it's been explained to me. I just want to make sure that I understand it. Can you clarify what a hearing of necessity is for my purpose, please, sir?
Certainly. So unlike a trial, this goes to an individual, an inquiry officer who is sent down by the Attorney General, and both parties can make their case in terms of, basically it comes down to that 3-part test, which has been approved through case law, which is that we're demonstrating that it is fair, sound, and reasonably necessary for us to complete a legitimate town objective. And this it is a report, it's not a decision, so it's not a legally binding decision. However, if the inquiry officer said that this is not fair or reasonably sound, then the town could proceed, but they'd be treading, I think, I would suggest, on some uneven ground if we were to do that. So having that decision made, and I would like to say strongly, I think, in our favor, to verify that this does make sense for us to proceed at this time and in this manner. I think that is helpful for us. So it's an opinion from an expert who comes in, reviews all the materials. We had Larry Solani and Peter Marr provide affidavits. We provided a bunch of appendixes with different maps or plans that we have in concept going forward. So a whole bunch of material went into that. So we treat it like a hearing, but it's a little bit more relaxed than that. So it's not a formal hearing, but we certainly use that opinion to ground our submissions tonight.
Supplemental, Your Worship. So just so I understand, we presented the folks whose land it is now. They had an opportunity to present as well?
Yes, Councilor Arpetta, that's correct. So both parties initially requested this hearing of necessity. So it's up to the landowners to request the hearings. So they both initially did. Ms. Dolan's legal counsel withdrew the request shortly before we had the hearing. However, we went forward on the vacant land property. So there was only one individual represented there, but they had the opportunity to make their submissions and appear before the inquiry officer. And she took that into consideration for her report, but still found in the way that I explained to you in terms of in favor of the town being able to acquire the property.
Final, Your Worship. So just so I'm clear, Ms. Dolan's lawyer knew about the meeting, knew that this is a chance for that counsel to speak on behalf of Ms. Dolan, and then withdrew, thereby not participating in that procedure. Is that what I understand, sir?
That is correct.
Thank you, Your Worship. Those are my questions.
Councillor Carrick.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. My questions, I guess, basically, Mr. Acapata or Councilor Acapata asked a couple of them, but the one I have is about the appraiser itself. The experience of the appraiser, is he well established? Have we used him before? And what kind of criteria does he, or credentials does he bring to this process for us, so that nobody can say, or we're not looking at not doing the right thing by the people that we're approaching to get the property from, et cetera.
Certainly. So we used Ray Bauer, who is a local individual, to do the appraisals. He's been doing this for, I don't want to age him too greatly, but my understanding is 30 to 40 years he's been doing this, and he's one of the top accredited individuals in the province. He gives seminars in Toronto frequently. He's one of the busiest guys around. I know he's done a bunch I believe he's done work for LaSalle in the past. He's done a bunch for Windsor and other local municipalities, and even the two law firms on the other side, and on another case that we're on, he's well known amongst the expropriation lawyers throughout the province. So I would suggest that his credentials are solid in terms of what we're looking for here.
Okay, so we're comfortable with being as fair as we can be through the appraisal process to the people involved in this process.
That's what we're ultimately trying to be. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Malash, and then Mr. Reno. You don't have a question, Crystal?
I do. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, thanks. It wasn't coming off mute. My question through you to Mr. Lowe is, I know it says here that we would like to obviously come to an agreement with the two landowners, but if we can't, this is kind of our process of proceeding with this either way. What type of timeline will we look at? So let's say we don't come to an agreement, we've got to continue this entire expropriation process. When would we be looking to take possession of these homes? Obviously with COVID-19 and everything going on right now, we wouldn't be expecting people to try to vacate their properties anytime in the very, very near future. I know real estate's still going on a day-to-day basis, but it's become a little bit more complicated. And I just want to make sure that our timelines are fair to the parties involved.
Absolutely, that's a fair point. In terms of the timeline, so the Expropriation Act basically lays out the specific timelines and what we have to follow there. So following, if everything is approved tonight and I'm given the direction to take the next steps, our next step is to register the actual plan of expropriation, which is attached to the bylaw tonight. And that's just basically showing the two properties on a reference plan. And we have 90 days to do that. Now, those are drafted, ready to go. They can be done at a moment's notice, but we have 90 days to do that. And following the registration of the plan, we have to serve certain notices to the other side. So I'll be preparing those as well. And that's within 30 days of registering the plan that I just referred to. So there's a 90-day, 30-day window, but we can shorten or lengthen those as much as we need to. Following that, once those notices are given, it's basically a 3-month window minimum before we can take possession. So we know we have at least a 90-day window where we'll be giving them notice. In terms of the individual who has their residence there, that's where I think we can build in a little bit of flexibility within reason in terms of how far we want to push that out. But there's at least going to be a 90-day timeframe on top of getting the reference plan filed and registered and also sending out the notices. So there's going to be a little bit of built-in lag, but it's going to be at least 3-4 months before we would, at a minimum, get this property in our possession.
I don't know. Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if we were able to negotiate with them and come to an agreement, could we negotiate with them that longer closing for them? If they don't negotiate with us and we have to go through the expropriation process, do we have that option of adding time on at the end, or is 90 days, that's it, you have to close at that point in time?
So the 90-day window specifically for the possession is a minimum. So we can make that a little bit longer if we need to. And that's where I say we can build in something with the agreement, but it's a matter of, we would hope that the negotiations are at least fruitful and moving in the right direction. If we get stalled down, there are steps that we can serve notice that, yes, we're going to be acquiring possession at such and such date, and we can put a hard deadline on that, but that's where we're going to have some built-in flex, and I've already had some discussions with the council for that individual.
Thank you.
Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dom, I just wanted to ask a little bit about the hearing of necessity. I apologize because I really wanted to make it there, and I know a lot of my colleagues wanted to make it there to actually see what the process looks like. And, you know, it seems like we have two different approaches here. We had one property owner that came down and gave reasons and gave their case, and then in the case of the other person, we got a letter today. And you have been very good in keeping us up to date with all the properties in this entire project, as has Mr. Miller. So I guess my question goes back to the hearing necessity: is what types of reasoning did the other lawyer give, the other counsel give, to say that this wasn't warranted? You know, what types of things did we have to get past in this case, that because we don't get a chance to hear that from the other person? But what did we hear in the case of the vacant land?
Just give me one moment. I'm just going through my notes here. I have the printed my notes from the hearing there. The majority of the arguments that were brought forward by the other landowner was more to the effect that that specific parcel wasn't needed. That there was basically a two-part approach. It was that parcel wasn't needed because we were going to build exactly what he was proposing to build, which there was a submission back in 2006, if I recall, for apartments and mixed use, and it was basically saying that if we were going to do the same thing, why not let him do it? Which all of our plans to date, we haven't discussed anything in terms of condominiums or mixed use like that, so, or what he was proposing there. So that was the first issue. And the second one was that it was premature because we haven't done certain studies in terms of parking and whatnot, in terms of why we need this property today as opposed to having to come back and get it in a couple of years. The hearing officer, or inquiry officer, sorry, appreciated that argument, but said that she did not believe that this was premature timing in terms of the fact that we own all the other lands and we're also acquiring lands at present. There was a clear need for that parcel, given its location, that we have the land across the street, we have the land at the rear and the land adjacent to it immediately, that it makes sense that the town would have that to maintain control along the waterfront. So that was the reasoning that was given from the inquiry officer that countered the argument in terms of the timing.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it makes sense to me. We've got property all the way around, that if we wanted to do something on a grander scale, it only makes sense that we need the entire piece. So going back again to all the updates that we've had in the last year and a half, 2 years, because these two properties were the kind of the holdouts and the ones that were going to the hearing of necessity, we didn't hear a lot about the communication that went back and forth between the town and these people. And I'm more concerned with, we'll call it 1010. I'm more concerned with that piece of property. What type of communication has gone back and forth? I mean, we got a note on file today saying, please don't expropriate, but what kind of reasoning, is there any reasoning or anything that's been heard other than sentimental value?
I would suggest that's not the case in terms of communications with the council for that owner. I mentioned via email to him just before the COVID-19. We knew that we were going to be coming back to council with this request, but we delayed it, obviously, given the state of the world right now. But I let him know, I think it was back in February, saying that, listen, we're going to be taking these next steps, just getting an update from his appraiser, basically. Where are we at in terms of negotiations? And his indication was that they were still waiting, as he indicated last week as well. They're still waiting for their appraiser. But at that time, he said, don't let that hold you up. Like, go forward with the next steps and take what steps you have to take. So in my understanding, here we are. And I didn't foresee any issues coming forward from either party, quite frankly.
And my final question would be, was there any kind of indication when 1010 withdrew from their hearing of necessity? Was there any reason as to why they chose not to give their side of the story, or they chose not to, it seems like that's where the proof's in the pudding, and where everything comes out. Is there any reason as to why they didn't do that was given by them?
None that I recall. I could pull up the email, but I'm fairly certain it was simply that we withdraw our request to have a hearing of necessity. I know it was after the fact that the other owner confirmed that he was going to go forward with it. So that was in terms of the timing, but it was the week or two before the actual hearing took place, and I don't believe any reasons were given. It was just they knew that the other side was going forward with it, so they withdrew at that point.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Do I see any other questions? Councillor Ekpata.
For you again to Dominic. Dominic, just for my clarification, statutes in the province of Ontario, as the council to the municipality, your responsibility is to make sure that we don't violate any statutes and mitigate our responsibility. I just need to hear it from you that you're satisfied that we have followed the legislation, adhered with all the regulations, and that this is a standard practice policy that we followed as per the statute that you've referenced previously.
Yeah, in terms of the Expropriations Act, it literally sets out the exact timelines, and we were following those to a T. In terms of the COVID-19 situation, I'm part of a larger group of municipal lawyers that share information, and with the new regulations that have been coming out, and the consensus is that the new regulations that put a pause on certain timelines do not really affect it doesn't touch what we're doing here in terms of the Expropriations Act. So I'm comfortable that we can go forward and maintain the timelines as needed.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I was able to attend the hearing, and Peter and Larry both made very strong arguments about the expropriation and why we need the property, and talking about the fact that there were no definite plans for parking lots, condos, anything, that they were just proposed plans at this point. So I think they made a very strong case for us as well at that hearing, and that the lawyer that was there, the chairperson of the hearing, I don't know what to call her, Dominic, I'm sorry, had a good opportunity to hear why we wanted the property, and to hear from the one person that did attend the expropriation. The complaints were not well suited, let's put it that way. So I think that we made a very good argument at the time. And I think that going forward, and I'm going to.
Sue, you muted yourself.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I don't know where you lost me, but I was going to go ahead and make a motion to approve Dominic's report and go ahead with the balance of the expropriation policy.
Okay, we have mover Sue Desjardins, seconder. Did I see your hand go up, Jeff Reno?
I will second the motion, but I had a question.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. Go ahead with your question, Councillor Reno.
I'm going to put this question through Joe because I think there's 3 people on this call, or at least 2, that could probably answer this. I just don't know which one to give it to. This plays to the human side of this issue, because I personally think that, you know, expropriation is always it's a hard way to go, because somebody's losing something, and you know, a lot of people look at this as somebody's taking something and somebody's losing something. So for the human side of this, I need to know, in the planning process um, of this project, and Councillor, or excuse me, Deputy Mayor Malash did talk earlier about timelines for closing and things. I'm just wondering, at what point of the project do we absolutely have to have 1010 emptied? I realize that we need to knock it down and things like that, but are there bigger infrastructure projects going on with this that can be done elsewhere, or does that house have to come down within X number of months? Like, where in the timeline for the entire project does the vacating and demolish of that house have to be put?
So I think in terms of the timeline for that the timeline for the demolition of that particular structure, I think that is going to be contingent on how fast council would like to move on this. I don't think that again, from a parks perspective and a park development perspective, we can develop any part of that park without having to demolish the house. Again, it would be, I would say it would be akin to leaving some of the structures that we had on the Westport Marina site, or even some of those that we have at the rear of the Siri site. So from that perspective, I think that it would likely be a situation where we would need to move on that in relative short order. That's not to say that we will move quickly in terms of where we sit and where we and where we sit and where we would and where we would like to move to. It's not to say that from the other perspective that we will be overly harsh with the timelines. We will be as generous as we can with those timelines, but from a park development perspective, that particular site is quite critical, in particular to the storm drainage work that needs to be done for the entire site. So that's why again, once we start development on that property, we will need to demolish that home, and that because that site is integral to that. Like I said, we're not looking to do this tomorrow. We don't want to be overly harsh with move out times and things of that nature. But as we develop that park, that is one of the areas that we will be our primary source of construction activity.
Okay, thank you. That actually answered the question. I do want to make myself clear. At no point am I suggesting that that building stay up. My only concern was, you know, when you talked about the drainage and things like that, if that is standing in the way of stage 1, then obviously we need to close a little faster. If you told me that all the drainage was happening at another end of the park and we could let her stay a little bit longer, those are the types of things that I think you answered that quite well. Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Item E2, year-end reports. Is Tano around? Dale.
Hello.
Hi, Dale.
Hi. Tano's not on the meeting this evening, but this is an annual report that we're required to do. Basically, it outlines the activities that occurred in our capital fund and our reserve fund, deferred revenue fund, and our investments for the year. And it's also a requirement for the audit, which is in the final phases right now. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I don't see any, but I'll ask one, Dale.
Okay.
Is it easy to say our reserves went up significantly and you're happy?
Yeah, it was a good year last year, 2019. Our supplemental levy was really high, and we got a one-time double payment of federal gas tax, and then the interest rate was high as well. So there's a lot of different factors and we didn't have any really huge capital projects that occurred. So no unusual expenditures or very high expenditures. So our reserves grew last year.
And they won't grow as fast this year because interest rates have fallen 1.5 percentage points.
That's right. Well, we'll have a report coming to the next council meeting to start. It'll be a monthly report that kind of outlines the impact that this crisis is having on our finances.
Good, thank you. Council's pleasure. Councillor Renault.
Yeah, I'll move to receive the report.
And I saw Councillor Carrick's hand go up. Seconder. On the motion, all in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Item G1, information to be received. I guess, Dale, that's you again, the fourth quarter report for 2019.
Yep, that's correct. This report outlines kind of at a high level the details of the operating fund. So again, there was a lot of one-time payments of our federal gas tax. Interest rates were high, supplemental levy was high, tax write-offs were low. So we had a good year last year.
Any questions? Council's pleasure. I think you moved that, Sue, correct? Okay. Seconder by Anita Adiccio Spagnolo, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. Schedule of work status update. Mr. Mara, there he is.
Good evening. Thank you. So tonight's report was discussed at our last council meeting. We are providing you an update on the current contracted work and some of the upcoming operational work as well. So in the report, you'll see a number of half a dozen projects that were underway. In particular, Heritage Estates project that is carrying on. The contractor has put in place their COVID-19 procedures, and they are now continuing. So that is expected to be completed within the next month or so. We're still waiting on a revised schedule with the contractor for that. The other projects that we had going on is the Volmer parking lot electrical. That contractor has also completed their COVID-19 procedures and has elected to carry on with that work. So that is continuing on. And we have Front Road Water Main project that is currently going to be starting. We anticipate that to be starting this week sometime, Thursday, I believe. That is going to be concentrated first in the two westbound lanes, the two southbound lanes will be closed. One lane will be kept going in each direction. That will be starting from Malden Road, between Malden Road and Victory. So that will be carried on. And then we have a number of other contracts that are carrying on and that are currently still on schedule to go. In particular, the Volmer pool HVAC, that project has a large purchase that we're currently waiting for that delivery. So that is still on track to be completed or to commence in July. A lot of these projects were underway prior to COVID-19. We're carrying on with them. A lot of them were still waiting for revised schedules because most of these had contractors shut down for a period of 2 weeks to address operational procedures to deal with the pandemic. And so those are the current six contracts that we have currently out. Coming up in the next few weeks or so, you will see a number of operational contracts proceeding, street sweeping, roadside cutting, catch basin cleaning, and all things like that. And we will still continue on with some of the other operational items like mill and pave. We'll be tendering that shortly, and some of the other concrete repairs and pedestrian safety initiatives. So with that, it's a report provided to council for information and for council to receive. And with that, I'm available for any questions.
Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Peter. Anyways, Councilor Reynolds asked for this last meeting, and this is a very, very good update. Heritage Park, they've been in and out of there. I've watched it, and looks like it's coming along nicely. When it comes to the bottom upcoming work and maintenance activities, is it possible for us to put that out to the public via our webpage, the town webpage? I understand, I've heard a rumor, but I'm not sure, but the post might be done as of May 4th, if that makes sense. I heard something about that with the COVID that's going on right now. So I'm not sure about that, if we've heard that at all, but something like that is very relevant and great information to put out to the public. So when they actually see this stuff going on, they'll already have a heads up. Whoever wants to pay attention and look at that, I think that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Did you want to comment, Joe?
Certainly, we can work with Don how to best communicate any of the upcoming work. We try to get most of this out as it's being planned and scheduled. A lot of it's dependent on contractor schedule, but certainly we'll work with Don in communications on how best to get this communicated out.
Thanks, Peter. Good question, Mark. Councillor Reno, you had your hand up, then Councillor Desjardins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Peter, I thank you for the report. I think if nothing else, this gives people a good indication that is going on. Life and the important things in town are going to get done. If I may ask, are there any projects that we're concerned about with the present limitations of COVID? It seems like a lot of things can go on. Are there any that we're concerned are not going to go on or we're unsure of at this point?
At this point, all the contracts that we currently have out there are indicating that everything's good. The only anomaly right now that we are still waiting to hear, and we've heard everything positive at this point, is the pool HVAC. Again, it's a unit that's coming out of the United States, and so that factory is still operating. They are building the unit. It's going to take some time to get it shipped here. It's a rather large shipment, but that is carrying on, and everything to this point indicates that they will be meeting their deadlines in having that delivered for July. So right now, there's nothing that is glaringly staring at us that would be a question mark, but certainly there's always the anomalies of what this pandemic might do elsewhere in some of the suppliers and things of that nature. But right now, everything looks pretty good.
Thank you very much. That's very well appreciated.
Mr. Militia.
Just a follow up to some of the comments that Mr. Mara had made. One of the effects that we're having because of COVID, particularly with the Vollmer Pool HVAC project, is that we had intended to keep the pool open right up until July. But as you know, Vollmer has been shut down, and the Vollmer has been shut down, and as a result, it is unlikely that the pool will be opened prior to the arrival of this unit. So the Vollmer pool will likely be closed from, I believe we close it somewhere late March, right through to July when we get this piece of equipment, and then through the construction. So it will be closed for some period of time, and that was not our intent. And that is directly related to kind of the COVID closures and some of the legislative mandates. So that's one area where we've had kind of a one thing happen after another. I would suspect that the word to open up recreational facilities may be in the time when we actually are in construction and repair work there. So we are running into that particular issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Militia. Councillor Desjardins.
Oops. Thank you. Two of my questions were answered about the pool and about the equipment. Thank you. Peter, what are the pedestrian safety initiatives that we're working on?
The pedestrian safety initiatives are the the sidewalk approaches, the tactile strips, and redoing some of those sidewalk approaches. That is most of the pedestrian safety initiatives for the next couple of years to change and get some of those areas of town more accessible for the AODA standards.
Okay, so will we be repainting some of the ones that are looking kind of rough around the edges?
Certainly, painting of crosswalks doesn't fall under the protection and safety initiatives. Painting, line painting on streets, that is an operational nature. That is carrying on. That is activities that the town staff does.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions? Council's pleasure. Moved by Councilor Desjardins, second by Councilor Breno. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Mr. Langlois, we have the building division activity for 2019.
This is another annual report that we're required to do. Just outlines the financial activity that occurred with the building department. There was a surplus at the end of the year. We had a good year in 2019. We were able to, if that building department's required to fund itself. So if there's a deficit, we fund it from the reserve. If there's a surplus, we put it into the reserve. So we were able to put in $283,000 this year. And I think this is probably the first time, I know it's the first time since I've worked with the town, but probably the first time since we've had Bill 124 in effect, that we actually have a surplus in the reserve account. So we've kind of, those years from the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, we've dug ourselves out of that hole the past couple of years. So that's a good news story.
Any questions? I have one. The money has to stay in that account. We can't take it out. That's legislated, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Council's pleasure. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, seconded by Councilor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Summary of reports to council. Deputy Mayor Malash, you're moving or do you have a question? You're moving, okay. Seconded, Councilor Carrick. All in favor? That carries unanimously again. We have 3 bylaws. On all 3 bylaws, all readings, we have a mover, Councilor Reno, seconder, Councilor Akpata. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Any council questions? Councilor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is going to go to Joe. Joe, there's been a lot of talk and hard feelings in the community about fishing. And I just want maybe something said on the record here. I realize that through this entire emergency process and all the meetings that you go to and all the collaborating you do with other communities in Essex County, and I would only imagine that we're all surrounded by water and we're all fighting the same fight. And you know, I just wanted a little bit of clarification about our stance versus the province's stance on fishing and on accessing the water.
Certainly, as the mayor has indicated early on in his comments as part of the mayor's message as well, we certainly have 2 issues that seem to be, again, very passionate people within the community with respect to the boat ramp and fishing. So maybe just dealing with the boat ramp first. We certainly have a number of concerns with respect to the operations of the boat ramp, some of which relate to the COVID-19 crisis and more so perhaps relating to the high water levels. Our current boat ramp operations fluctuates almost on an hourly basis, and as a result, we've elected to close the boat ramp, both from a water level perspective and certainly from the COVID-19 perspective on the social distancing and gathering. We've had a lot of comments and we've received them as well as to folks that are, you know, well-intentioned folks within the community that are wanting to do their part in some ways and trying to and suggesting a fix to the boat ramp in an economical way. One of the challenges we have with that is, although they do it with the best of intentions, there is a significant liability that we will hold with respect to the work that would be done on our asset. And so for that reason, we are electing to continue to close the boat ramp both from the COVID-19 and the high water levels perspective. I think we were perhaps a little too liberal last year with respect to the operations of the boat ramp. And in retrospect, there were times that perhaps it should have been closed, but we elected to keep it open. But at this point, again, from a liability perspective, it just it doesn't make sense, knowing what we know about the activity down there, to leave it open. So that's the first half of it. The second half relates back to the fishing side of things. And really what we're trying to do is capture the intention of the provincial government's mandate to limit the activity and prohibit really recreational activities. And so we're trying to take a stance where it's consistent across the municipality. Some municipalities are allowing fishing in public areas. We are not. And partially because when we look at how, again, from a policing perspective, it becomes very difficult. Again, the province has really mandated a more of a stay-at-home type of situation, and to avoid any social gatherings to the greatest degree possible. And so we're taking that to heart and ensuring that we try to the best of our abilities, enforce those rules across the board. One of the conversations we've had internally is if we allow fishing to happen along the dock, how is it that we can't allow folks to use the skateboard park? Because they can socially distance as well. How is it that we don't allow folks to use the tennis courts because they can socially distance as well? And really it becomes a question back to, again, under the provincial order of eliminating all recreational activities. And that's the stance that we've taken. I know folks are very passionate, particularly in the boating and the fishing community. They're very passionate about it, and it is a pastime. It is an outlet. It is a mental relief for some, and we understand that. We're hopeful that in the coming days that as the news gets better and better as to how the pandemic is being handled, both regionally here and across the province, that some of those restrictions will slowly be released. But until now, at this point, from a recreational perspective, we are following the lead of the province in that they are prohibiting recreational activities, and we're viewing all recreational activities on all town-owned lands to be restricted in that fashion. So I think that might have answered your question. If not, please follow up.
I think that was a great answer. I guess the only other little part, which I think you kind of alluded to, we're kind of in a wait and see with the provincial standards. If the standards were to open parks, is it fair to say that the fishing may come back if the parks were reopened?
Certainly, if the provincial government relaxes some of the restrictions with respect to recreational activities, which we believe is going to happen, it's just a matter of when. But if the provincial government, or more so when those restrictions are relaxed, I could see that the fishing activity would be relaxed as well here, as would tennis courts and basketball courts and all those types of recreational activities that we have. It'll become a question of the extent to which those orders are issued by the provincial government, but we would certainly follow suit on that. The issue with the boat ramp is a little more problematic, and it's really more about liability and use of the boat ramp. That's one where perhaps from the COVID-19's perspective, the boat ramp may be available for use, I'll say, but from a liability or use because of the flooding or high water table, it may not be. So that one is, I don't suspect that one is going to be as easy to solve or as easily remedied as the fishing side.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, statements by council members. Councillor Akpata. You're still muted, Mike. There you go.
There we go. Your worship and members of council, just wanted to make everyone aware of the contact I had with the province of Nova Scotia. A few days ago, I spoke with David Fraser, the Sergeant at Arms and Director of Security for the province of Nova Scotia, who runs the legislature. In his department, he has the protocol officer for the province of Nova Scotia as well. And as you may be aware, sir, and members of the community, that the flags in our municipality are at half staff in commemoration of the 22 Canadians that were killed in Nova Scotia. the tack that we have taken is we are following the protocols as set by the province of Nova Scotia and recognizing the citizens that they lost for our flags. So through Mr. Fraser, he's indicated that when the Premier of the province of Nova Scotia and the protocol officer indicate that all of the commemorative ceremonies have been completed, the funerals are done, and the commemoration ceremonies for their citizens are completed, a note will come out to the municipalities across the country to raise their flags to full flight, thereby acknowledging the loss in Nova Scotia. So, Your Worship, we are in line with protocol, and we are making sure that we're doing everything as directed by the province of Nova Scotia as it relates to where our flags are on our municipal buildings.
Thanks for looking into that, Mike. We appreciate that. Reports from committees. Oh, sorry, Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention just a big thank you to our community. It's really hard to be locked in your house. It's really hard to stay home. It's really hard to not do the things that you want to do when the weather breaks. I get comments that, hey, I saw a few people standing too close together, or I saw people talking, but for all those comments, I get twice as many comments about some of the great things that are happening out there. One little project that I'm sure all of us have heard about are the painted rocks. We've got community members that are going out and painting little rocks with little messages that people are going out and finding on their leisurely walks. And it is really helping the mental state of our community at large. And I just think they should be recognized, because there's probably at this point hundreds of people that are involved. And I just think it's a great thing. And it's just a testament to the strength and the resiliency of our community. So I just wanted to recognize that group, and as well as all the great things, you know, the people that are helping the shut-ins, people that are helping the older people. There's an incredible amount of care and compassion going on in our community. And I just think it's a big hats off to everybody. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jeff. Reports from committees. Notices of motion. Confirmatory bylaw on the first reading. Deputy Mayor Milosh, Councillor Reno, all in favor? That carries. On the second reading, Councillor Akpada, Councillor Edicio Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Third and final reading, Councillor Carrick and Councillor Desjardins, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. You see your schedule of meetings coming up. Hearing none, everybody, meeting's adjourned. Stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. Take care. Good night.